Well, Searles Valley Minerals is a, don't do that. I have hecklers in the front row. We're a company in the Mojave Desert of California. If you draw a line from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, roughly we're in the same area. And I've got a picture here. So we do some solution mining, which is I've never heard of until I got there. Most mines dig holes, or they operate big holes or tunnels or something. Our mining operation goes into a dry lake that's not dry underneath. And you can see part of the lake here and 4 of our facilities. We process the brine that comes out of this lake. It's like a 6 or 7% brine, so twice as much as seawater. It has amazing chemicals inside. We process it with proprietary and very ecologically favorable methods and turn it into a bunch of salts and other chemicals. So I also said, you know what, this is our lake. You see some parts that are wet on there. You also see some parts that are looking like white because it's really dry and it's white powder out there. And most of what we do on this lake, and this is like about 8 miles across, we drill holes. We've got maybe 5,000 wells out there, and they go down from 300 feet all the way to maybe 1,500 feet, depending on the layer. And those layers determine which kind of chemicals come out that we process. So fascinating, just amazing place. So we take these brine solutions and we turn them into things like sodium bicarbonate, baking soda. Soda ash, which is used, it's really cool because they use it to make beer bottles or wine bottles to reduce the temperature required, so that it's very effective. Boric acid goes into fiberglass. We have salt that goes on roads or for industrial purposes. And these products are just white powder. We ship about 1.5 million tons a year of white powder. That's like 15,000 rail cars filled with white powder. A lot of it goes out by truck, but we still have a lot of product going to the U.S., to those other regions, South America, and we ship overseas. So it's just a wide-ranging product. We're impressed with it. We've been there 147 years, I think it is. A guy named John Searles, who's part of the name, was out there looking for gold. He stumbled across some white stuff on the surface, put it in his bag, went to Mojave, by Los Angeles, had it assayed, and found out it's borax. Well, that was a big deal back then, so we're still making the same product. We just pump it out of the brine now. So our products go in things like flat screen TVs, certainly in the bottles. Laundry detergent has soda ash or bicarbonate. You could even, I would say my favorite product is, it goes into the Gorilla Glass that we all have, makes the glass harder. So very cool products. Now, we're doing about, I think it was $100 million to spend every year. A good portion of that, I'd say probably 60%, 70% is indirect spend. What my people do is they take all those big machines and all those pipes and all the equipment there and buy spare parts. We have about 18,000 spare parts in inventory that are active. Some of them we don't use for maybe 20 years. We'll go get it. This is the last time we bought it was 25 years ago, but we have to keep one on hand because that part of the factory needs to stay running. So my team of buyers, the number one thing they do is keep the plant running. We use min-max, we do other kinds of proprietary methods. Sometimes we use spreadsheets, and we even take these types of specialty equipment out here and we go out for bid. The MRO supplies typically for us is nuts and bolts, and this is where we went to a commodity group some time ago called PVF, pipes, valves, and fittings. There's about 1,500 parts in that. It's roughly $1 million to spend, so it's only 1% of my overall spend per year. But it's a headache. These are low-value, high-volume things that nobody really wants to spend a lot of time on. So we've just centralized over the years on 3 national suppliers. There's a guy before me who did some work on it. We'll share his stuff in a minute. But we have low-hanging fruit. We have a lot of things that have never really been looked at from a supply standpoint or even quoting it out. So PVF, I've got pipes, nice shiny picture. I've got the valves on the left, and I've got fittings and things on the right. So a lot of stainless, a lot of carbon steel, some very specialized steels. This is what we do in this one category. So as I said, there's like 1,500 parts. A couple years ago, one of the guys there went out for bid on this thing. So he looked at the entire process, all the population of 1,500 parts. So it's $1 million. Yeah, that's a lot of money. What he did is he kept trying to refine the spreadsheet and back and forth in the spreadsheet, and the suppliers had questions. It couldn't match up with their parts. After 8 months of doing quoting, he issued contracts. This saved a little money, but he missed out on the 8 months of savings he could have done if he had done it more quickly. At the time, he didn't know about the bid ops and now Arkestro platform. In his case, I would say, well, we had tariffs going for us. It was Trump was starting to block things, so it's a few years back. And everything he achieved by just getting it perfect and getting every number specialized, he just lost it all in the delay. And my colleague back there, Dave's going to talk about what it costs to delay things. Right, David?
I'll try, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. So we took this 1,500 pieces of parts, 1,500 SKUs. So let's do an 80-20. Well, there's 108 parts in that. So 108 parts is the majority of my spend. I've got 3 national suppliers. Okay, maybe we could get some money off this if we bid it aggressively using the tool. So we figured we could get $70,000 of cost savings on maybe $600,000 in spend. So we put all this together. We had a lot of help. At the time we went out for bid, our maintenance program got cut back drastically. It was COVID time. We couldn't do overtime. We had to stagger all our teams in the field, so they couldn't work together, so maintenance just got cut. If it was broken, we fixed it, but we didn't do a lot of preventative maintenance. So our spend actually came out to $250,000. And I got $17,000 on savings right there. But it's still $17,000. That's 7% we didn't have before. So this is what we're banking on for the future, to take things and segregate them into, is this a good group to do? Is this something we want to spend money on? I'm not going to tackle the next 1,400 parts all at once. Yes, sir?
How long did it take?
Oh, as opposed to 8 months?
Yes.
About a week. That was on me though. Our data was a little bit touchy. I got descriptions this long, the export was this long, so I'm truncating data. It took a few days just to see, yeah.
I quite clearly remember.
Yeah, you nod your head a lot, so you know how that was. And so we'll be doing the rest of those where it makes sense, but I've got other issues with products. So today, this is what we're facing. Yesterday I got an email from one of my suppliers. He's a single source. He said, hey, this is the 23rd, so he sends a note. On April 1st, prices are going up 91%.
Oh. 91%.
91% price increase next week. And well, yeah, I'll give you a week warning, by the way. He's not answering his phone. He's not responding to emails, but he did send this thing out and launch it and probably went home and curled up in the corner. We don't know. Well, my first answer to him, if he ever does pick up the phone, is no, we're not taking the price increase, and we'll be quiet like we were yesterday because we signed for a minute. In this case, I may have an option. He's a single source. We have decided to make him the only source. He's provided this unique white powder additive to our chemicals for 20 years. The plant doesn't want anybody else, but their budget's going to be killed. So, yeah, maybe we have leverage. So today, the costs are going crazy. We've been lucky with most of our costs. They haven't been hammered so much. Gasoline and all those things are going up. All the lubricants are going. But we can only control costs so much. What we're going to do is apply predictive pricing, what we've learned today from Edmund and his team, and put that into our data and start making this a process that we do every month with a classification of products. So my takeaways for you is don't worry about your data. The first guy spent 8 months, 7 months normalizing the data, but he just couldn't get the numbers to add up his way. I spent about a week trying to get the rest of the data to come in, but then we truncated it, so we had to get a programmer to write it. We did all that. But at the time I realized you don't have to get it perfect. Get close enough. If we had done it perfectly, we would have probably waited another month or two. In this case, just get it done. And David, that leads me into your presentation here. And then we'll take questions afterwards.
Thank you kindly.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Now we have David Schultz, who is with Westfall, leads their supply chain, and is our newest corporate alliance member. So really excited to have you speak with us, and I will pass it on. I think we will just do questions at the very end. So yeah, with that, thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. This might have backfired a little bit because Edmund and the team know me, and
told me I had 10 minutes. So, because they know if they told me I had 30, well, I had 55 or something, right? So I'll try to make this right. Okay, so my discussion, and we'd love for this to be interactive, like we said at the end, questions or whatever it might be, because I'm sure there's a lot of questions. And, I feel like at this conference, it's not a good conference for me if I don't learn as much from you folks, or more from you folks than, maybe I give a couple of, comments and so on. And as I said, there's a lot of people here that have made a lot of great impact and strides with the Arkestro platform. Obviously, we're beginning that journey now, but we have a lot of confidence that, so much confidence that I'm sort of betting my reputation on the fact that it'll go well. And, after that section, from the break to lunchtime, I feel really good right now. But it's all about the results, right? So as we talk about conquering the paradox of choice, as I mentioned, I truly hadn't seen Edmund's presentation or anybody's presentation before this, and I think we're all sort of on the same page about that with regards to when there's a lot of choices out there, a lot of times people become paralyzed and they don't do anything. And I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that. And that's why I think this was a good combination to work with Thomas on this, because he just made a lot of great statements, right? Don't worry about all your data, right? And then there was a question about how long did it take, and the answer was a week. When you start hearing all that stuff, it's pretty amazing. You see a demo up there, and the procurement person's completely in the background. Now, I will say that in our case, we're very lean when it comes to procurement, right? If you're not, we're going to have to find something for that person to do it, right? Well, we can probably get them over the IT group or something like that. But no, people should be concerned about that. At the end of the day, as Scott mentioned, and a number of other folks mentioned, Joanne and so on, it's a combination of humans and technology all the time, working out. But in our case, we're a company, and people have been asking me, the company that I joined is called Westfall Technik. I got one slide on it. I'm going to go real fast. It's not about Westfall. But at the end of the day, it's a combination of 19 companies in 4.5 years. So you can imagine it's chaos in terms of trying to pull all those supply chains together. And one thing I learned at GE when I was there, and people have always heard about the term Six Sigma. Six Sigma is 3.4 defects per million. Humans are incapable of Six Sigma on a manufacturing line, by the way. It's been proven that they're capable of it, if you have 7 or 8 of them in a row. So you need some sort of mechanization, some sort of technology. I would say the same thing with 19 companies in 4.5 years. We can assist humans, but we need some sort of backbone or platform to make that happen. So right away, when I got recruited by the CEO for this, right in my head I said, okay, I need to bring something with me. And obviously I had some options in mind. And because a lot of people might say, well, that can't be right. It's been there 30, 40 days. How did he get approval to sign this already? Well, kind of two things, right? They brought me in because they trusted that I hopefully knew what I was doing, number one. But also, I think it's a situation where, this was going to enable us. We're owned by private equity, right? They're not patient. We all know that, right? They want things like yesterday. And when you talk about the speed of this, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that's a big, big factor in terms of what solution you're going to go with. So anyway, just a quick thing in terms of call to action for us as procurement professionals, supply chain professionals, and I think you guys obviously would agree with this. We're facing enormous challenges right now. I think we talked about getting ready to do the dance. People say all the time, we should get a seat at the table, and I used to always push back on that. Get a seat at the table? You earn a seat at the table. But I'll tell you right now, whether you want the seat at the table or not, you're there. Now we got to perform, right? So you got to make sure you've got everything you need to perform. Faster and smarter than ever before. I mean, we all know that, right? Everything's changing. In fact, your email was I've seen some price increases. I don't know if I've seen 91%. That's kind of crazy, but I've seen a lot of them, and most of them are either a week from that point or backdated, even. And I just sent out to our whole team a number of graphs and all of what's going on with raw materials, and 15 supplier letters about increases in the last 2 years. Right? So I came into this business and I went to the suppliers and I said, I want some justification of that. Can you send me your slides or whatever? And almost to the T, every supplier sent me some slides that were updated through September of 21. They all stopped. It's like, why did they stop? And I think everybody got fatigued. I'd asked them all. People were asking questions from March of 20 to September of 21. Then I was like, I don't even need to justify it anymore. Oh, boom, here's another letter. Here's another one. Everyone said, okay, thank you, can I have another? And we tried to pass it along, but we couldn't. But in this inflationary environment, you know, we're mainly in a lot of the plastics business, right? So resins are really important to us. And with a lot of these CPG companies, consumer packaged goods, we may have an escalator de-escalator, which means it's already built in. If resin makes strong movements, we already have it pre-negotiated. We're going to move up or down. But nothing else was negotiated there. That has to change. Anybody look at pallets lately, packaging, freight, everything else. So we didn't adjust up and down on that because that was kind of noise before. That's not noise anymore. So we put a whole plan together with all of our input, raw materials and so on, for the estimators. When they go back, it's not just resin. Now, if you have a contract with a customer, you have to obviously abide by that. And that's why I'm talking about the speed that's so important right now because of this environment. If you had a contract, Thomas, in place with that sole the supplier, and sometimes there's reason not to have them, by the way. I don't know if they could have given you a 91% increase on April 1. So it's not anything that we have contracts, not have contracts in certain areas. But I would just say that the longer we keep waiting, the base price that they're going to be moving up and down off of just continues to go up every day. So that's an important point. The other thing is many of these challenges existed prior to the pandemic, right? I mean, you know, the team at Arkestro and other companies, this wasn't just, oh, you know, the pandemic happened and all of a sudden we got to change everything. These challenges about, you know, data, putting that together, the plate of spaghetti that we saw about, you know, the ERP systems and so on, that's all real. And that really hasn't changed. So there needed to be a solution to tackle that. And then leveraging technology is the only way, as I said, in terms of trying to be as productive as you can. One of the items that I always read when it comes out, I always wait there for when it comes out. I think it's the Deloitte Chief Procurement Officers survey that comes out, a report. I think it comes out in April for the previous year. April, this came out in April for the 2020, and then the one for this past year will come out probably, I think, next month. But one thing I thought was really interesting here, and maybe somebody can help me, what do you think is interesting about the order of these right here? Can anybody tell me what would maybe pop up?
Cost isn't number one.
Great point. Cost number 2 now. Right? Everybody thinks, oh, cheap procurement is all about cost. Well, don't get me wrong, it's a strong second. But operational efficiency is number 1. It's a top priority. This isn't me talking. This is, you know, a group of folks. You know, as they say, the wisdom of the crowd, right? They're usually right. So it's the operational efficiency. This is data, right? We'll talk about that in a minute. And then reducing costs is number 2 now. It's important, but people understand that. And the other thing that is important, I think it really dovetails into the Arkestro solution as well, is it's really all about risk and supplier management. And I can't stress enough the supplier management part of it, right? There are some people, like I think there were the slides where it said, you know, you won the negotiation, or you lost the negotiation. That's probably not right. A win-win sometimes is not when one side wins twice. I used to have a business partner, he thought a win-win was when he won twice. So we had to work all that out, but we can talk about that in a minute. Still think about it once in a while. But so we went through that. But that's not, a win-win is truly when both sides, in some ways, maybe feel dissatisfied, but they got the deal done, you know? And you kind of go through that whole thing. So here, one of the major things that I noticed was, and I mentioned it earlier, Arkestro built the supplier part of the solution first. So when I look at this whole section down here, supplier collaboration, a top strategy to unlocking value, a close second to digital transformation. So the whole scheme of all of digital transformation, supplier collaboration is right there. Because I truly mean that, you should treat the suppliers like you treat your customers. Get the best price in the world, get the best delivery in the world. But if you can't, if they won't ship it to you, or you have a bad, you know, reputation or relationship, it doesn't matter. Give the best price in the world for something you can't procure, right? I mean, that's how I look at it. It's pretty simple. So again, as you look at this, there's a tremendous amount. I encourage you to call that up. It's I think it's free of charge. Just put your email address in. So help you put your email address in. It's worth it. There's a lot of information there. So as I've spoken about before, there's a lot of noise out there about what's your opinion, I call it. You know, as I said, opinion masquerading as fact, right? And I think it's real. And like we said before, there's 3 words that people don't know how to say in a lot of cases. They're not bad people, you know, it's not with malice aforethought. It is not I love you, it's I don't know. People have a tough time saying that, right? And then if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, right? So someone influential raised their hand, maybe they raise their hand probably, because they think they're too high in the organization to raise their hand. And they make a statement, and then everybody goes, wow, they made that statement sound like fact. If that's real, let's go down that road. And that road's completely wrong. But nobody asked them for any facts, right? So we've all heard the statements before, right? I kind of like something, right? In God we trust, all others bring data. That's a pretty good one. Or figures don't lie, but liars figure. So there's a couple ideas about, you know, there's a famous artist one time that said, the greatest deception men suffer is their own opinions, right? That was our friend Leonardo da Vinci. Then there was a famous philosopher who said, opinion is the median between knowledge and ignorance. I don't think I'm buying that. Some not so famous people, but still smart people, said opinion is usually something which people have when they lack comprehensive information. That's a little scary. And lastly, the fewer the facts, the stronger the opinion. Right? So I encourage you to get some data behind some of these opinions. And I even try to do that myself. I say, I make the mistake often, but a lot of times now I'll say, in my opinion, I'll preface it with that, and I'll state it. But that's important. That gives you the opportunity to say, well, let's discuss that a little bit further. So I really think that's an important thing. Maybe just not in business, just kind of anywhere. And again, I don't think people have, you know, malintent. It's just, you know, I should have an opinion on that. I should talk about that. So when you talk about fact versus opinion, I'm not going to go through all this. You can read this. The biggest concern on this is, you know, on a fact, right, it can be verified, opinions, you know, a judgment, so I won't read this. The most important part of this slide is the bottom. They're identical, right? They both have the power to influence. Right? So you got to make sure you know what's fact and what's opinion. And again, not just from your internal folks, but externally, things that you hear and so on. And it's just, I just encourage everybody to kind of try to get behind that. And then when it comes to data, right, a lot of people take this approach. With all the information you can, we'll think of this sort of better. Right? So everybody's grabbing all this data, and they're putting it together, like you said, the teams are working day and night and so forth. And I will say, like Thomas mentioned, I do believe, in many ways, that perfect is the enemy of good. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now, I won't lie, I used to tell my kids that good is the enemy of great. But that's a whole different story, that's not a personal side. But from a perfect standpoint, it's the enemy of good a lot of times. And I've been stifled a lot of times with, you know, I came in and I'm like, wow, 19 different companies, different systems and everything. And I will say that Westfall's done an amazing job. There's a system called the IQMS ERP system, but actually have brought a lot of that data together. We have some really resourceful people that have done that. But when I talk to Arkestro, I let them know right up front, you know, that this isn't, everything's not in a perfect place where it ought to be. All right, so this is the technology innovation spider map that I referred to earlier when I had some high-level summary comments that Dr. Eloise Epstein obviously provides to all of us. Now, when you look at that, stare at that at the center, then close your eyes. But when you look at that, I get a popsicle head. I don't know about you guys. But you kind of look at this thing and you're like, okay, so where's the starting point? Where do I start? You know, where do I go? And so forth. And my whole point on this is that, and I think Evan said it better than I could ever say, this is that whole idea where there's 1,000 things on the, is it the Cheesecake Factory? You know, you don't know what to order when you go there, right? But I have a cheese having, that's pretty good, this steals some of those slides. But you know, I have a cheese having, but when it comes down to here is, these, every time you turn around, I bet you there's 4 or 5 companies that have come up in the last 3 months that aren't even on here right now. But they're not doing what's happening here today that I know of. Nobody's doing that. So what I'm saying is, whatever works in your situation, if you're interested in speed, you're interested in impact, you know, you're interested in maintaining or growing your supplier relationships. Those are all the things I'm interested in. So you have to make sure you handle that properly in my opinion. Then we also talked about, in this inflationary environment we're in, the quicker we do things even now, the better, because things are going up very, very quickly. Now, there are some things that will be tied to indices, maybe that they're gonna be tied to indices forever. Right? There's not much you can do about that. But I think what's happening in our company is we're tied to indices, let's say on plastic or resin. But the base amount that's going up and down off of is wrong. That's what we have to readjust. And if we can readjust that in a short period of time, and I can pass through, whether it's an increase or a decrease, then I'm not playing arbitrage, right? If I'm taking a gamble on when the prices move up or down, and whether I pass it or I don't, or I'm not able to, now I'm in a different business that I never even chose to be in. And that's a risky endeavor right there. So graphically, I think one of the ways to look at it is, and I like this graphic, picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So this is really describes what I call COD, the cost of delay. So if you come in and you can get something done, let's say in a week or two, or even a month, versus 6 months, then that amount of money you would have saved, so I'll give you an example, right? It's pretty simple. If you had $1 million savings on the table, and you wait a month to get that going, right, because you're trying to make everything perfect, then you lost $83,000 that you will never get back, right? But in fact, you might lose more because it was higher when you finally got into the agreement. You wait 10 months, that's $830,000 because you wanted to get it perfect, right? So I'm not saying just shoot from the hip, let's be clear, right? But there's a point where you have enough information where you just got to take action. And I think that's kind of where we're at now, quite frankly. So, we've all heard this before. You know, if you see the title of my slide here, Ready, Aim, Fire. There's a lot of folks that I've worked with in the past that have been ready, fire, aim. I've done that with many folks. I'm not saying that. I'm saying ready, aim, fire, but do it smart. Do it in a smart way. So as you can see here, there's a point of diminishing returns, right? So you have to do a certain amount of work. Don't get me wrong. This doesn't just happen, you know, by itself. But the whole autonomous side, the whole, you know, self-driving vehicle analogy and things like that. And I think it was said to me one time, you know, that the whole Tesla model, you know, they have self-driving now, but there is a human sitting in the seat, right? Doesn't mean that someday there will not be. But I think we're the folks that are sitting there, taking advantage of the vehicle and the technology, but making sure that everything is just right and how we want it. Like we talked about on that Jenga, the table maybe is a little out of balance, but the computer doesn't know that, right? All those kind of things are really, really important. And then as you look through this whole thing, you also want a tool that can quantify, or that you can quantify the soft costs, right? So everybody's, you know, talked about the iceberg and so forth. There's some ideas about what might be there. But when you really think about the productivity that a tool like this can bring as well, there's another reason why we might look at that. We don't have the resources right now to add 10 people to procurement, right? But we need to act as though the equivalent of bringing 10 FTEs on it, say without technology. And it still would be the equivalent, but you know, it would be getting better. There is a point of diminishing returns even when we're bringing people on, obviously. So really, to me, it's all about the total cost of ownership, right? There's an initial cost, and a lot of people stop there. But there's a lot of other things that happen there, right? What's the cost of quality? All those kind of things. And you might say, well, I saw the demo. How do you take that into account? I think all that's taken into account when you put in the algorithm, okay, if it's a incumbent, they have to be knocked out, in my opinion. You know, the whole idea about the prize fight, right? You got to knock the heavyweight champion out, right? Doesn't mean it completely go below that, but there's switching costs and things like that. So you can build that in, and then the system will tell you who the winner is, all those different things. But you still have the final choice because you should have the final choice, right? There might be some nuances that, at least at this point, may be difficult to capture in a technology. Yeah. Now, about 8 people will probably say, no, we got all the nuances covered too. But there might be a couple that in the future they'll be there. So I think total cost of ownership is a real important one, and that's why, quite frankly, you have to pre-qualify. I think many of these folks as well in terms of their quality and things like that. If you're going to get into an aggressive sort of negotiation style, what I like about what we saw is, to me, it's more a little more passive, let's say, than you're going to a reverse auction, right? Well, we're actually having an event next Friday, and you know, you call up the supplier and you say, hey, congratulations, you made it to the final round. And then you tell them what the final round is. And they ask you why you congratulate them. right? It's brutal. It's brutal. But that's not the way this is. This is transparent. They're involved in the process, and you want to make sure. It's like I used to say in my organization, I like to run an organization that's tough but fair. The but fair part's really important, right? You have to, it's not really important, it's essential. But, it's difficult out there. And, I think the future, quite frankly, is a term that I heard a long time ago, but a lot of people don't use it enough, and it's co-opetition, right? So you have to cooperate with even some of your competition nowadays. And if you don't even take those kinds of things into place, then you're gonna get passed by and you're in criminal. So lastly, I think what this tool does, this looks very complicated, and I think Scott yesterday might have had a slide like this. Everybody attended that negotiation session yesterday. So he had a slide like this, but he didn't use all these same terms. Like, how many people are familiar with the term BATNA? Now, are you familiar with that? Because is that mainly the program on negotiation at Harvard? I gotta say that again, Harvard. I couldn't understand how I said it in Orange, right? But that's the best alternative to a negotiating agreement. So what happens is, and I think about this all the time before I go into negotiations and actually try to quantify these. So basically at the top, I just walk you through it quickly. It starts with the seller's settlement range, right? So there's the worst case for the seller and the best case, right? Or oftentimes referred to as the most desired outcome or the least acceptable alternative, right? So that's at the top. And then there's a best alternative to a negotiating agreement, which means the seller has to think, if we don't even come to an agreement, what's my alternative? And if the answer is, I don't have an alternative, then you're probably going to do pretty well. But if there's an alternative, then it's going to be interesting to get into that COPA, which is, I guess, the zone of possible agreement. That's where you can make the deal. So again, the buyer's going to do the same thing. It's, what's the desired price? What's your most desired outcome? And what's the least acceptable alternative? Now, I want to give Harvard credit to those terms because Scott didn't use them, so maybe they're copyrighted or something. So I want to make sure I'm not using terms like that, but I'm not. So best alternative to negotiating agreement is really, really important. So, just wrapping up, so those comments, I think we have maybe 10 minutes left. We can take some questions, so when you come back up, Thomas. Thank you for that. Basically, I just wanted to say that, Thomas took the bull by the horns, right? He took it, he said, hey, I got to get something done here, recognized that, saw some advancement, and he's going to continue doing that. I didn't have the opportunity to do that where I was. Now, I thought about that as I'm coming in. This is an essential tool to make a quick impact, and I'm not sure that everybody doesn't need to do that. Even if you're not owned by private equity, when you think about your first 90 days in a job, the first thing you probably want to do is make a positive impact, and no better way to do that. So thanks for your time, and the thing that I'll end with is we have a lot of consultants hanging around here probably, right? They only understand 4 blockers, right? So that's what a win-win is, but that's probably in consultant speak, right? Top and to the right. Good for both of you and your supplier, right? It'd be easy just to say, we both got to win, but I got to put it in a 4-block fashion, so they can understand that. So you really need to get to that spot, because if you don't, you may get an agreement, but it's not going to last, or it's going to be a huge 91% increase, or something's going to happen for certain reasons. So I appreciate your time, and then if you guys have any questions or comments, please.
Yeah, let's get up there. Awesome. So we do have these chairs here. If y'all want to sit, we can move them to the front there. We've got about 10 minutes left. If you have any questions, just direct it at one of these 2 gentlemen, and yeah, we'll pass the mic around. So.
Passing over.
Well, I think first here, and then.
Because we're already microphone. You want?
Hi, Patrick Raymond with IBC. That's a question for Thomas. You realize a 7% savings. Do you know how that compared to the suggested pricing that the tool produced?
I don't know precisely. I think the tool was somewhere in the 9% range, and we ended up with about 7. We had an opportunity out of 108 parts to do, one supplier gets everything. So you pay a little more, you pay a little less. Everybody, one supplier gets the whole thing, so they get it all. We broke it up into 5 categories, and we have winners in each category. And even in those, we didn't cherry pick. So we have one, the category of valves, there were 13 items in there, 2 of them are more expensive from the other competition, but he got the whole thing. So he just makes up that cost. I think we're looking at about 9% and 7% was certainly a refreshing number for us.
Was there any pushback from any suppliers?
No, actually, one of the guys, I had 6 suppliers in that. One of the key guys now works for me. He's the MRO buyer. He buys PVF. And I said, what was it like? He goes, it was amazing. I'm sitting there with the owner like for 3 hours. I'm doing this stuff and it's telling me to do this. And we're just, it was like, they got fucking, they didn't win the bid because they're a high priced company. But just the impact it had on him and the owner was surprising to hear. I didn't see that part.
Hello, this is the Welsh Classification Bureau. I'm just wondering how your teams and user adoption has gone down. Has everyone embraced it as a good thing, or has there been any kind of, this is a fertile job situation?
Right now, they don't know much about it. We are in survival mode in the MRO. I've got 2 MRO buyers, very experienced, and they're flooded with work. So my goal is to try to carry that water bucket effectively so that they don't have to do a lot of the legwork. I can handle the data, work with the Arkestro guys, teach them how to use it so that they can take 5, 10, 20 components on a small job or a big job and quote that out and see the results.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Looks like you're gonna
This one's for Dave. What's your biggest concern on the implementation side? Obviously you got a lot of companies, a lot of different processes kind of synced up with this. So I would love to hear what you're concerned about in terms of that process and what you're looking to see from the Orchestro.
Yeah. I think the biggest concern is just the change management process itself, right? I mean, you have to have a creation of a shared need is kind of the first thing in change. And I think everybody understands that shared need, and then everybody's going to have to understand what their role is in that, right? And as I said before, there's a lot of work that needs to get done outside of the automation that was there. So the individual who's doing the procurement, that person still has plenty to do. Maybe not in that particular movement that went in there, but there's a lot to do. My biggest concern, as well beyond that, is really on the supplier side. Just making sure that the suppliers aren't looking at this as you just gave us some fine input, but we don't expect it for everything to go perfect. It's not all going to go perfect. Anybody, if someone's an incumbent, they have your business today, and they get threatened, it doesn't matter what tool you're using. They're going to have some sort of reaction, right? But as they look at it, they see how it's implemented and so on, and they've seen other items, I think they're going to understand that no longer can you charge 80% more than you should have in the past. I almost want to, like the software companies, when you upgrade, to the next level or something, if you miss 6 upgrades, when they let you upgrade to the next, you got to pay for the 5 upgrades before that. Well, I've had suppliers that say, well, I just matched NSC's price on MRO, so why don't I keep it in business? Well, why don't you go back to 5 years that you matched it, right? And give us a rebate for that, and then we can say everything's even now, right? So it's a difficult situation, but the biggest thing is I want to make sure that we're not disrupting the supplier base and that it's all about continuity of supply right now. It's not all about price. Yes, we have a question.
I got a follow-on to that, Dave. Like, you're a supply chain guy. Oh, sorry. Hey, you're a supply chain guy. I can tell you kind of wear both hats, procurement and supply chain. You started in I'd love to hear more about this, about like the impact procurement has on supply chain today, and like on the supply chain side, what you're most worried about and what you think the priority should be.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, I don't even discern between the two anymore in many ways. I mean, the whole procurement operation is a major portion of supply chain as far as I'm concerned. And I think everybody has realized that. When you talk about, you can't open up magazines and so on and see supply chain and everything else. How many people are talking about Long Beach and how many, ocean freight, how much ocean freight's off the coast of Long Beach and so on. But the biggest concern on supply chain to me is continuity of supply. That's the biggest concern. And every time you turn around, it's like, we get a price increase for 5 or 6%. I don't like that. Someone tells us that you know, glass fiber is no longer available, that goes in the resin, that goes into your customer's product, that's a problem, if it's not available. And when it's not available, guess what? Your BACnet changes. Your least acceptable alternative, your most desired outcome changes. So it's all about continuity of supply as far as I'm concerned. And that means if it's a sole supplier or a single supplier, and I think there's a big difference, right? Single supplier is you choose to only have one supplier. Sole supplier is when there's only one supplier out there. So the idea of you know, rationalizing your supplier base, the idea of getting alternatives is really important. But I do believe that everybody is at the table now, and that's why after this, I want to learn a little bit more about the S&OP process. Because I believe that the sales and operations planning process is what's going to bring all this together now. And the commercial guys, they're listening now. It's not like, oh, we don't care about those guys anymore. They want to hear what we have to say because we got to get them products so they can stop.
Any more questions? Got time for maybe one more.
So you have to end very cleverly when there's no questions.
Yes.
Okay.
So, Dave and Thomas, thank you for speaking with us. We're excited to grow our partnership together. Obviously, there's a lot of good things to come down the road. So, with that, let's give it up one more time for
Thank
Dave
you.
and Thomas.